Hey everybody, it's Nathaniel Campius, and today we're going to talk about God. Alright, so we have two definitions of God that I pulled up on Google here. These are from the Oxford English Dictionary. 1. In Christian and other monotheistic religions, the creator and ruler of the universe and source of all moral authority, the supreme being. 2. In certain other religions, a superhuman being or spirit worshipped as having power over nature or human fortunes, a deity. Alright, so those are the two definitions of God. So God is already an ambiguous term, right? Because we have two definitions of it right off the bat. Alright, now let's look at the definitions of God in some arguments. In Anselm's argument, his argument is, I could read you the actual argument from the original text that it was written in, but that's a little difficult to understand. So this website, thankfully, not only has the original text, but also has a summarization of it that is easier to understand. All right, let's look at the premises of this argument. 1. It is a conceptual truth, or so to speak, true by definition, that God is a being than which nothing greater can be imagined. All right, so let's hear that again. 1. It is a conceptual truth, or so to speak, true by definition, that God is a being than which nothing greater can be imagined. That is, the greatest possible being that can be imagined. Alright, so that's the first premise. 2. God exists as an idea in the mind. Alright, that's the second premise. 3. A being that exists as an idea in the mind and in reality is, other things being equal, greater than a being that exists only as an idea in the mind. 4. Thus, if God exists only as an idea in the mind, then we can imagine something that is greater than God. That is, a greatest possible being that does exist. 5. But we cannot imagine something that is greater than God, for it is a contradiction to suppose that we can imagine a being greater than the greatest possible being that can be imagined. 6. Therefore, God exists. Alright, so that's Anselm's argument. I'm not going to talk about this argument or whether it actually proves that what it purports to prove exists, but let's look at what the definition of God is in this argument. In this argument, the definition of God is, and the definition of the thing that this argument is trying to prove exists, and the definition of God that it gives is, as it says here in the summarization of the argument, a being than which none greater can be imagined, or the greatest possible being that can be imagined. Alright, so that's one definition of God, the greatest possible being that can be imagined. We already had this other definition of God, the creator and ruler of the universe and source of all moral authority, the supreme being. That's the first definition of God in the Oxford English Dictionary, and that's the one that we're going to compare and contrast with this other definition of God, because with the other definition of God, he's probably talking about the Christian God, because he was Anselm, and that guy was a Christian intellectual. So yeah, so alright, so let's look at those two definitions now. Again, the greatest possible being that can be imagined, and the creator and ruler of the universe and source of all moral authority, the supreme being. Now, these definitions don't exactly agree with each other, because one says that God is only the greatest possible being that can be imagined, and the other says that he is both the supreme being, which is kind of like, I don't know, but kind of like Anselm's greatest possible being that can be imagined, but it also says that he is also the creator and ruler of the universe. So here are two distinct, even though somewhat similar in one respect, definitions of God. Alright, let's look at Augustine's argument from Truth. We're not going to actually analyze or examine or determine whether these arguments are true or not. We're just going to look at them and see what the definition of God is in each of them. The argument from truth. All right. This is the argument from truth. Premise 1. Our limited minds can discover eternal truths about being. 2. Truth probably resides in a mind. 3. But the human mind is not eternal. 4. Therefore, there must be an eternal mind in which these truths reside. Alright, so from this argument, it is clear that the definition of God in this argument is an eternal mind. Now, that's a completely distinct definition from the other two definitions that we discussed. So here we have three distinct definitions of God, two of which are from arguments for God, and both the arguments for God have different definitions of God. So this is a weird discussion. This is certainly a strange discussion, the discussion of whether God exists or not. Let's look at an atheistic argument against God. Alright, this is a website article called the free will argument for the non-existence of God. Alright, it starts out saying the Christian God is defined as a personal being who knows everything. Alright, so right off the bat we have a definition of God from this argument. We don't even need to read the argument. It says the Christian God is defined as a personal being who knows everything. Alright, so does that agree with the Oxford English Dictionary definition of God, the creator and ruler of the universe and source of all moral authority, the supreme being? No, it says that he's a personal being who knows everything. Nothing in the Oxford Dictionary definition of God says he knows everything. And nothing in the Oxford Dictionary definition of God says that he is a personal being. In the argument from truth from Augustine, it says that he's an eternal mind. Okay, so an eternal mind might seem like it has something to do with knowing everything, but it really doesn't rationally equate. So, so it's different from that definition. And now let's look at Anselm's argument. The greatest possible being. Now, the greatest possible being doesn't necessarily equate to a being that knows everything and that is personal. So we have four clearly distinct definitions of God. We have four clearly distinct definitions of God, and three of these definitions stem from arguments for and against the existence of God. Now, how can we have a discussion about the existence of God when the term God is so variously defined? It's ridiculous. You can't. Those three arguments aren't even talking about the same thing, and they purport to be talking about the same thing. We need to agree on a concrete, precise definition of God, and then we can start talking. Thank you. This is Nathaniel Campius. Goodbye.